exterior of the house is shaped like a boat.
This is Sam. He is an amazing finish carpenter. And most importantly, he's part of the Smart Woodshop Fam. And he has been here doing the finish work, the woodwork, and this beautiful home that's huge and right on the Gulf. We won't talk price, but you know this isn't a budget home. So for Sam to have the exclusive woodworking in this house, it's saying quite a bit.
We didn't want any kind of a caulk joint or anything between the baseboard and the wood floors.
Base molding is actually up against the studs, not against drywall, and there's a channel here creating this really cool detail. So I don't know if my hand shows this, but from the drywall to the surfaces are flush.
Every 12 to 16 inches, we would put a pair of screws, one on top and one on bottom, and use those screws by running them in and out so that the baseboard is resting actually on the two screw heads, and the depth of those screws determines where the baseboard ultimately is going to lay. Once we had our length measurements, we would take those to the saw like a regular cut list. We would cut all of our lengths with the angles and everything the way you would want it, like installing a normal baseboard. The baseboard by necessity has to be taller than the space because we need that extra meat to be able to scribe and cut everything to drop it down to fit. And so once the baseboard was cut to lengths, we would take height measurements from the reglet to the floor, from one end to the other, and maybe a couple spots in between, just to figure out how much variation in the floor level there was relative to this reglet that was set perfectly level. If there was a taper or anything like that, we needed to know, so we would actually cut or mill the width of the baseboard once to a dimension that was larger than what we wanted to end up finally, but that was small enough so that it would still tuck under this space between the reglet and the floor. Once we had the baseboard cut to length and then milled down to an initial width that would just let us get it inside this cavity, then we would go around and basically do a mock install of all the material, nailing it up as if we were installing it exactly in the place that it would go, but with the top edge of this baseboard up in constant contact with the reglet all the way around. We did it the same way that I've done for cabinetry and other pre-finished materials that you want a really tight joint. We would use painter's tape across the bottom of the baseboard facing us, and then we would use a razor blade on a 1/2 inch block and set the block on the floor and use the razor blade to cut the tape, and then just peel the bottom part of the tape free. Taking that back to the bench, we'd make an initial cut with a small circular saw following that line that the tape established, but stop about a 1/16 short of where we wanted it to ultimately end up, and that would be our first cut. And once it was that close, we would go back with a small block plane and just shave it down little by little until we were just exactly on that razor's edge. And so that lets us, rather than using a belt sander or a power planer or an angle grinder, using a block plane to creep up to the line, it's almost impossible to go too far. Discerning viewers will have noticed that the fluting side was installed facing out. People who don't know, that is not the way baseboard is typically ever installed. It's actually functional. It's never intended to be seen. It's not like a typical molding detail that you would want to showcase. The reason for installing with the fluting out is because it was at the request of the client, the owner. Every piece has two sides, and they're picking the good side to face out on the flat, and then to receive the finish, and then to ultimately be installed where you're going to see that. It does turn into a bit of like a Sudoku puzzle where you're checking your board lengths for usable length, making a cut list for the entire floor of your wall lengths, and then figuring out and labeling each individual board and board section before you even start cutting, because you need to know which parts of each board are going where in the house before you even start cutting everything up. So another complication that installing with the fluted side out introduces is you can no longer do a square butt, because you can see the fluting cavity runs all the way through, and you'll see that through the back as well as this rabbet. And the only way really to do it right is to miter the inside corners. And so once you have gone to a mitered inside corner with pre-finished hardwood, there's no, again, caulk, no filler, no nothing like that, so everything has to be airtight. We were on this site more or less consistently for about 6 months. It's also a large house, and there's a lot of funny geometry within the house because the exterior of the house is shaped like a boat. And the interior of the house then ends up with a lot of strange spaces and angles, a lot of corners in this house. So it's not like every room is 4 sides and we just scribe 4 pieces and nail them up. It's like we might be doing several dozen cuts to get in and out of a single room.
And an amazing house like this, to be hired to do the work says a lot, but also to know that when you walk out the door for the last time, the client is going to look at your work and have a big smile. And I just think that that's something that, you know, the payment is nice, the money's nice, but it is nice to be rewarded in just knowing that you've done the absolute best work that you can do. Smart Woodshop Fam, if you get a chance, go over to Instagram and look for Trinity Construction and Design and get to see this place and other amazing places that these guys have built. Thanks for the tour, I appreciate it. And thanks for putting me in touch, Sam, appreciate it. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Dude, that was sick.